Hello and welcome to Baker Street Fireside, where every story feels like a conversation over a warm cup of coffee. It was a bleak November evening in 1892 when the bell of 221B gave its familiar jangle. Rain lashed the windows of our sitting room like impatient fingers, and the fire hissed in protest. Holmes lounged in the basket chair, eyes half closed. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Lady in Mourning Silk. It was one of those November evenings in 1892 when London seems to sink into itself, as though the very stones of the city had grown weary of holding up the sky. A damp yellow fog pressed against the windows of 221B Baker Street, smearing the gas lamps outside into bruised halos. The fire in our sitting room grate snapped and hissed like a cornered cat, throwing restless shadows across the Persian rugs and the chemical-stained deal table where Holmes kept his more volatile experiments. I, John H. Watson, M.D., late of the Indian Army, sat with my feet to the fender and a half-finished monograph on the ash of Indian cheroots spread across my knee. The room smelled of tobacco, coal smoke, and the faint, acrid tang of the 7% solution which Holmes had abandoned only that morning in favor of a particularly recalcitrant problem in Baritsu. Holmes himself reclined in the basket chair, long legs stretched toward the blaze, violin across his lap though he had not yet drawn the bow. His eyes were half closed, the hawk-like profile sharpened by firelight. A thin ribbon of blue smoke rose from the clay pipe clenched between his teeth. He had been silent for the better part of an hour, which in Sherlock Holmes meant that his mind was racing at express speed through corridors I could not hope to follow. I had learned not to interrupt such silences. They were the forge in which his deductions were hammered into shape. The clock upon the mantel, a wedding gift from the King of Bohemia, if you please, had just chimed the quarter when the bell below gave its familiar double jangle. Mrs. Hudson's measured tread ascended the 17 steps, paused, and the door opened to admit a draught of cold, wet air that set the flames leaping. "Begging your pardon, Mr. Holmes," said our landlady, "but there's a lady to see you. She would give no card, only that the matter is urgent and private." Holmes did not open his eyes. "Describe her, Mrs. Hudson, every detail." Mrs. Hudson, accustomed to such catechisms, folded her hands at her waist. "Tall, sir. Veiled in black silk from head to toe, though the veil is of the finest quality. Brussels lace, I shouldn't wonder. Gloves of black kid, no jewelry save a single jet brooch shaped like a rose. Voice low, refined but trembling. She carries a reticule of black moire and smells faintly of attar, of roses. Oh, and her boots, French buttoned with a military heel. Mud on the left sole only, as though she stepped from a cab into a puddle." Holmes's eyes snapped open, gray and keen as winter, steel. "Show her up at once, Watson, the spirit lamp and the lens on the sideboard, and pray extinguish that infernal cheroot. The lady's nerves are already frayed." I obeyed, though I noted with amusement that Holmes himself continued to puff away like a small steamer. Mrs. Hudson vanished, and in less than a minute the rustle of silk announced our visitor. She entered with the hesitation of one who has rehearsed every step yet still fears to cross the threshold of fate. The veil concealed her face, but the firelight outlined a figure of elegant despair. Shoulders rigid beneath the mourning cloak, gloved hands clasped so tightly that the kid creaked. She stood just inside the door as though the room itself might bite. "Dr. Watson." Her voice was low, cultivated, yet threaded with strain like a violin string drawn too tight. "They told me at the Yard that Mr. Sherlock Holmes solves impossibilities." Holmes rose in one fluid motion, all 6 feet of him uncoiling like a panther. "Impossibilities are my specialty, madam. Pray be seated and remove the veil. I dislike conversing with shadows." She hesitated, then crossed to the chair opposite mine. The firelight caught the jet rose at her throat. carved petals, a single dewdrop of ruby at its heart. With a gesture both defiant and fragile, she lifted the veil. I confess I drew breath sharply. Porcelain skin, violet eyes, red-rimmed from weeping, a mouth that might have been carved by Praxiteles had grief not honed it to a blade. A single crimson rose, fresh, impossibly vivid against the black, pinned at her throat. Her hair, the color of midnight, was drawn back severely, yet one rebellious curl had escaped to tremble against her cheek. Lady Beatrice Ashcombe, she said, the name falling into the room like a gauntlet. My husband, Sir Reginald Ashcombe, was murdered 3 nights ago in our home on Curzon Street. The police insist upon suicide. I know better. Holmes had resumed his seat, fingers steepled beneath his chin. Pray continue, Lady Ashcombe. Every syllable, every inflection. Begin with the moment you last saw Sir Reginald alive. She drew a shuddering breath that seemed to draw the fog itself into her lungs. It was the 3rd of November, a little after 11. Reginald had dined at his club, the Diogenes, and returned in a hansom shortly before 10. He was distracted. He had been so for weeks, ever since the ruby arrived. Holmes's eyebrow arched. Ruby? The Ashcombe rose, she said. A pigeon-blood Burmese stone, 30 carats, flawless. It came to Reginald by inheritance from his uncle, the late Lord Carstairs, who acquired it in Rangoon in '56. Reginald kept it in the safe in his study, insured for £30,000. He was to have it reset for me, for our 10th anniversary next month. Her voice cracked like thin ice. He never would. I leaned forward, medical instinct asserting itself. You say he was distracted. Any physical symptoms, headache, nausea, palpitations? She turned those violet eyes upon me, and for a moment I felt the weight of an entire aristocracy's despair. He complained of pressure behind the eyes, said the room smelled of roses though none were in bloom. He dismissed his valet at 10:30, locked himself in the study with a bottle of brandy and the ruby. I retired to my boudoir on the floor above. At midnight I heard a sound, like a champagne cork but sharper. I thought it fireworks from the square. I did not investigate until morning. Holmes's voice cut the silence like a scalpel. Describe the study precisely. Lady Beatrice closed her eyes as though seeing it still. 2nd floor, rear of the house, overlooking the mews. 1 door, oak, Yale lock. Reginald had it fitted last year after a burglary in the square. 2 French windows bolted from within, opening onto a balcony no wider than a coffin lid. The balcony gives onto a drop of 20 feet to the area stones. No ivy, no drain pipe. The room contains a partner's desk of mahogany, a Turkey carpet, Persian, 16th century, a portrait of Reginald's mother above the mantel, and the safe let into the wall behind it. The derringer lay upon the blotter beside his right hand. Derringer, Holmes repeated softly. Make and caliber? American .41 rimfire. A souvenir from the Centennial Exhibition in Philadelphia, 1876. Reginald kept it unloaded in the top drawer for 20 years. He loathed firearms. I could not restrain myself. Powder burns? None. Her whisper barely stirred the air. The police say the muzzle was pressed to his temple, yet there was no fouling, no tattooing upon the skin. The bullet entered above the right ear, exited the left temple, embedded itself in the paneling opposite. The door was locked, the key in the lock on the inside. The windows bolted, no sign of struggle. Only... She opened her reticule with fingers that trembled like aspen leaves and placed a folded square upon the table. It was heavy paper, cream-laid, watermarked with a crest I did not recognize. The message was inked in crimson so vivid it seemed wet. I took the note, turned it to the light. The ink had feathered slightly where a tear, Hers or the writer's had fallen. Threat or promise, I murmured. Both, said Holmes. He produced his lens, bent over the paper like a stooping hawk. Written with a broad, nibbed pen, pressure heavy on the downstroke, right-handed, educated, agitated. The paper is handmade, Italian, available only at Asprey's in Bond Street. The crest, he tilted it. A rose entwined with a serpent, motto, Virtus in arduis. Curious, Lady Beatrice watched him with the fixity of one who has entrusted her soul to a surgeon. There is more, the ruby is gone. Holmes's head snapped up. Gone? The safe was open, the velvet case empty, the combination, Reginald's birthday, had been dialed correctly. No sign of force. I felt the old thrill course through me, the hunter's instinct Holmes had awakened in me years ago on the Baskerville moors. Robbery, then. The locked room a blind. Or suicide staged to look like murder, Holmes countered. Though the absence of powder burns troubles me. Watson, your medical opinion? I considered. A contact wound with a .41 Derringer should leave stippling to a radius of 6 inches. None reported? Impossible unless the shot was fired from a distance of at least 3 feet. Yet the angle suggests the muzzle was at the temple. Chapter 2. The scene at Curzon Street. The fog had thickened into a living shroud by the time our hansom clattered into Curzon Street. Gas lamps flickered like dying stars, their halos swallowed by the yellow murk. The Ashcombe townhouse loomed 4 stories high, every window shuttered save one on the 2nd floor. A single eye of light staring into the night. The rain had eased to a stealthy drizzle that beaded on Holmes's Inverness cape and turned the brim of my bowler into a gutter. Constable Gregson met us at the area steps, lantern swinging, mustache bristling with official indignation. Suicide, Mr. Holmes, clear as daylight. Door locked, key inside, pistol in the gent's hand. No need to muddy the waters. Daylight, Holmes murmured, stepping past him, is precisely what we lack. He produced his own bull's-eye lantern. Its beam cut a tunnel through the fog as we mounted the marble stairs. The entrance hall smelled of beeswax and old money. A grandfather clock ticked with the solemnity of a judge. Grimsby the butler, 60, spine like a ramrod, eyes the color of wet slate, awaited us beside a suit of armor that had probably seen Agincourt. He inclined his head a precise quarter-inch. Lady Ashcombe has retired, sir. The study remains sealed. Holmes's smile was wintry. Then unseal it, my good man. Time is a thief, and evidence its swag. Grimsby produced a key ring that jingled like a jailer's. We ascended the grand staircase, carpet so thick it swallowed sound. Portraits of bewigged Ashcombes glared down in powdered disapproval. On the landing, a stained glass window depicted the family crest, the rose and serpent we had seen on the threatening note. Moonlight through the colored panes painted Holmes's cheekbones crimson and emerald. The study door was oak, solid as a coffin lid. A brass Yale lock gleamed new against the dark wood. Gregson produced the key found inside. Holmes waved it away. Instead, he knelt, lens to keyhole. Scratches, he announced. Fresh. Someone has used a duplicate within the last 48 hours. He straightened, turned the original key. The lock clicked with well-oiled obedience. The door swung inward on a breath of cold air and the faint, sweet reek of decay. The room was exactly as Lady Beatrice had described. Partner's desk of mahogany turkey carpet, portrait above the mantel. But the portrait now had a new feature, a neat bullet hole through the painted eye of Sir Reginald's mother. The corpse himself lay slumped forward, head resting on folded arms as though merely napping over accounts. The Derringer, a nickel-plated relic with ivory grips, lay beside his right hand, one chamber discharged. A dark petal of blood had soaked into the green leather blotter, its edges already browning. Holmes moved like a surgeon. First the windows, two sets of French doors opening onto the narrow balcony. Bolts thrown from within, but when he slid one back, the metal grated with a hair-fine resistance. He scraped the brass with a penknife. A fleck of green verdigris came away. "Recent," he said. The bolt was closed after being opened in damp air. Curious. Next the body. I noted the entry wound above the right ear, small, round, no powder tattooing. Exit wound larger, ragged, the left temple a ruin, yet the pistol lay on the right side. "He was left-handed," I said. "See the ink smudges on his left cuff, the position of the pen tray." Holmes's lens hovered over the temple. No fouling, no stippling, the muzzle was never in contact with the skin. Fired from a distance of at least 3 feet. He lifted the derringer, sniffed the barrel. Discharged within the room, certainly, but not by the man who held it to his head. He turned to the desk. An appointment diary lay open to November 3rd. In crimson ink, the same hand as the threat. Beside the diary, a crystal tumbler held an inch of brandy, untouched, a faint oily film on the surface. Holmes dipped a finger, tasted. "Almonds?" he said softly. "Prussic acid? No, too slow, something subtler." The safe behind the portrait yawned open. Empty velvet case, combination dial at 140370, Sir Reginald's birthday. No pry marks, no acid burns. Gregson cleared his throat. "Ruby was in his waistcoat pocket, found it myself." Holmes's eyes glittered. "Show me." The inspector produced a chamois pouch. Inside, a pigeon blood ruby the size of a pigeon's egg, flawless. Holmes held it to his lantern. For a heartbeat, the stone blazed like a coal from hell. Then he laughed, a short, sharp bark. "Paste," he said. "Exquisite work. Bohemian glass, foil-backed. Worth perhaps 30 shillings to a theatrical costumier." He moved to the carpet. Kneeling, he traced a faint indentation near the desk. "Chair moved recently. Someone stood here, weight on the balls of the feet. See the compression of the pile?" He produced his tape. 5 feet 7 inches from the desk, the exact distance for a clear shot to the temple. A soft scrape at the door. Grimsby, pale as parchment. "Inspector Lestrade is below, sir. Demands to know why the seal is broken." Holmes rose, brushing dust from his knees. "Tell the good inspector that Mr. Sherlock Holmes has just promoted his suicide to murder. And Watson," his voice dropped to a whisper, "note the faint scent of attar of roses lingering beneath the brandy. Our midnight rendezvous was kept after all." Chapter 3. The Butler's Ledger. The morning room of the Curzon Street house was a shrine to Victorian restraint. Walls paneled in dark walnut. A single gaselier dimmed to a funeral glow. And a marble mantel where a clock ticked with the relentless patience of a hanging judge. Rain still tapped at the tall windows like a creditor who would not be denied. Holmes had dismissed Gregson with a flick of 2 fingers and now prowled the room like a caged lynx, eyes cataloging every detail. The alignment of the coal scuttle, the angle of the fire irons, the faint scuff on the parquet where a chair had been dragged aside. Grimsby the butler entered with the precision of a stage cue, silver tray balanced on one palm. 60 years old, spine straight as a guardsman's, face carved from teak and disapproval. The tray bore a spode tea service for 3, the pot exhaling steam scented faintly with bergamot. He set it upon the gate-leg table with a soft clink that sounded in the hush like a jailer's key. "Earl Grey, sir," he intoned to Holmes. "Lady Ashcombe's preference. She is indisposed and begs you will excuse her." Holmes waved away the cup. "Indisposed or instructed to remain above stairs, never mind. Sit, Grimsby. You have served the family for 31 years come Michaelmas, sir, since Sir Reginald was a lad at Harrow. Excellent. Then you will have no objection to answering a few trifling questions." Holmes's tone was silk over steel. He produced the crimson-inked diary page from his pocket and laid it beside the teapot. "This hand is familiar to you?" Grimsby's eyes flicked to the page, then away. "Sir Reginald kept his own appointments, sir. Yet the ink is not his, nor is it Lady Ashcombe's. She favors Windsor and Newton indigo, as any stationer in Bond Street could confirm." Holmes lifted the pot, poured for himself, though he had refused it moments before, and inhaled the steam. "Curious. The bergamot is masked by something sweeter, a tar of roses distilled in the same still as the note beneath the study door. You purchased the scent, perhaps?" A tremor passed through the butler's left hand. The teaspoon rattled against the saucer. "Lady Ashcombe suffers migraines. I procure remedies from florists in Jermyn Street." Holmes sipped, set the cup down untouched. "Then let us procure the household ledger, the one in which every candle, every postage stamp, every drop of attar is recorded in your impeccable copperplate." Grimsby hesitated the length of a heartbeat. Long enough. Then he crossed to a secretaire, unlocked a lower drawer with a key from the ring at his waist, and withdrew a morocco-bound volume. Holmes took it as eagerly as a miser takes gold. The pages were a monument to order, columns of black ink, entries dated, initialed. Until the week of October 30th. There the ink changed to crimson, vivid, arterial. Holmes's finger traced the line. Holmes looked up. "Sir Reginald wore no gloves, and the Lyceum has been dark since the 29th for repairs to the fly loft." "Explain." Grimsby's throat worked. I purchased the ink for Lady Ashcombe's correspondence. The gloves were for the housemaid's birthday, the theater ticket." His voice cracked like old varnish. "There was a woman." Holmes leaned forward, voice soft as a scalpel. "Describe her." "Veiled, always veiled, black silk heavy. Came twice after midnight. Sir Reginald admitted her himself through the area door. He called her Crimson Rose, paid me a sovereign each time to forget I had seen her." The butler's eyes darted to the windows, to the door, anywhere but Holmes's face. "She left a scent behind. Roses and something sharper, like bitter almonds. I felt the old chill crawl up my spine. Cyanide?" Holmes ignored me. "You will provide the exact dates and times of these visits. And the area door key. There are two, I presume." Grimsby nodded miserably. "One on my ring, one in the pantry safe." Holmes closed the ledger with a soft thud. "Watson, note the tremor in Grimsby's left hand. Early Parkinson's or guilt? The glove's size 612. Lady Ashcombe's hand is smaller. I measured the impression on her reticule last night. The theater ticket, purchased the day after the Lyceum closed. Someone wished to establish an alibi that would not bear scrutiny." He rose, restless energy crackling. "Grimsby, you will remain within call. Watson, the conservatory, Lady Ashcombe's domain. I smell monkshood beneath the bergamot." As we left the morning room, I glanced back. Grimsby stood rigid beside the tea tray, the untouched cup trembling in its saucer like a small, trapped heart. Chapter 4. A Cipher in Crimson Ink. The hansom had barely drawn to a halt before 221B when Holmes vaulted out, coattails snapping like a banner in the wind. The fog had lifted to a sullen drizzle, and the gas lamps along Baker Street bled orange into the wet pavement. I paid the driver and followed, my boots squelching, the butler's ledger clutched beneath my arm like contraband. Mrs. Hudson met us at the door, eyes round. "Telegram, Mr. Holmes, marked urgent." Holmes tore it open with a thumbnail. The flimsy fluttered to the mat. "Ashcombe ruby recovered. Stop pocket of deceased. Stop suicide confirmed. Stop Lestrade." Holmes's laugh was a short, humorless bark. "Lestrade confirms what he wishes to see. Upstairs, Watson. The lens, the spirit lamp, and the Playfair Square." Our sitting room was a battlefield of evidence. The crimson note pinned beneath a paperweight, the fake ruby glowing sullenly on the mantel. Grimsby's ledger open like a dissected corpse. Holmes swept books from the table, monks, cryptography, a dog-eared Bradshaw, and spread the threatening note beneath the gas jet. "Observe," he said, voice low with excitement. "The paper is thick, the ink heavy, yet beneath the lens—" He adjusted the focus. "Microscopic perforations, pinpricks forming a grid 5 by 5, a cipher." I leaned in. The holes were all but invisible to the naked eye, yet there they were, 25 tiny wounds in the cream-laid sheet. Holmes produced a sheet of tracing paper, laid it over, and pricked through with a needle. Then with a pencil he filled the grid. "Play fair," he murmured. Keyword obvious. Rose. In minutes he had decoded the perforations. Warehouse 12. Limehouse, midnight, bring the diamond. I whistled. The ruby, Sir Reginald was lured to the docks. Precisely. The note beneath the door was misdirection. This was the true summons. Holmes held the paper to the lamp. The perforations vanished, leaving only the crimson thread. Invisible unless one knows where to look. Our murderer is a student of Poe. He turned to the ruby. Under the lens, its facets revealed telltale bubbles. Glass, not corundum. Paste, as I suspected. The real Ashcombe rose is still at large. Lestrade's recovery is a plant. The door burst open. Lestrade himself, rat-faced and triumphant, brandishing the chamois pouch. "Thought you'd like to see it before I lock it in the yard safe. Suicide, clear as gin. Ruby in the waistcoat, threatening note, locked room, case closed." Holmes took the pouch, weighed it in his palm. Indeed. Though I wonder why a man intent on self-destruction would pocket £30,000 before pulling the trigger. He tossed it back. "Keep your trinket, Inspector. Watson and I have an appointment at Limehouse." Lestrade bristled. "You'll find nothing but rats and river mud." "Rats leave footprints," Holmes said sweetly, "and mud preserves them." We cabbed east through streets that grew narrower and meaner with every turn. The West End's elegance dissolved into Whitechapel's grime, then into Limehouse's opium haze. The Thames stank of tar and decay. Warehouses squatted like blind giants along the wharves. Warehouse 12 was a soot-black hulk, its doors padlocked, windows boarded. Holmes produced a picklock, the padlock side open. Inside, the reek of wet rope and guano. Our lanterns revealed overturned crates, a rat scuttling into shadow. On the floor, a single crimson petal, fresh, impossibly vivid. Holmes knelt, lens to the boards. "Boot prints," he said. "Hobnail, size 8, left heel worn inward, sailor's gait, and here," he scraped with a knife. "Wax green matching the verdigris on the study bolt. Someone stood here waiting." A glint beneath a crate. I fished it out. A lady's kid glove, size 612, black, the palm stained with crimson ink. The scent of a tar of roses clung to it like a ghost. Holmes's eyes blazed. Our crimson. Rose was here, and she was not alone. Chapter 5. The Actress and the Alibi. The Lyceum Theatre stood shuttered on the Strand, its portico draped in mourning black for the late manager. Yet a side door in Wellington Street yielded to Holmes's persuasive skeleton key, and we slipped into the warren of corridors that smelled of grease paint, dust, and the ghost of applause. Gas jets hissed low. The stage yawned dark and cavernous, the flies above lost in shadow. A single work lamp burned in the wings, illuminating a woman in a crimson velvet cloak who turned at our approach with the fluid grace of a panther. "Mr. Holmes," she purred, voice honey over gravel. I wondered how long the scent of roses would draw the hound. Miss Irene Vale, darling of the West End, cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass, eyes the green of absinthe. regarded us with lazy amusement. A cigarette smoldered between gloved fingers, the smoke curled like incense around the painted backdrop of a moonlit garden. Holmes inclined his head. "You have the advantage of me, madam, though I perceive you expected company." She laughed, low and musical. "Sir Reginald promised me the Ashcombe Rose at midnight. He never arrived. I waited until the stage doorkeeper locked up at 1. She flicked ash onto the boards. "Ask Johnny Finch. He'll swear I never left the theater." Holmes's gaze flicked to her hands. Crimson ink stained the kid gloves at the fingertips, the same shade as the diary and the threatening note. Rehearsing a new role? Lady Macbeth, perhaps? Out, damned spot! Irene's smile did not reach her eyes. A private correspondence. Reggie liked his love letters vivid. She drew the cloak tighter. Beneath it, a gown of scarlet silk shimmered like fresh blood. He was leaving Beatrice. The ruby was my settlement. I felt the old soldier's indignation rise. "A man lies dead and you speak of settlements?" She turned those absinthe eyes on me. "Men die, doctor. Jewels endure." She produced a playbill from her reticule. The Duchess of Malfi, dated November 3rd, her name blazing in crimson type. "I was on stage until curtain. Ask anyone." Holmes took the bill, held it to the work lamp. The paper was crisp, the ink still tacky. "Curious. The Lyceum has been dark since the 29th. Fly loft repairs. Your understudy, Miss Clara Wren, took the role last week. She has your height, your coloring, and, most conveniently, your cloak." He tapped the playbill. "Printed yesterday at Hatchard's in Piccadilly. The ink matches the diary entry." Irene's composure cracked like thin ice. "Clara, that little—" "Precisely." Holmes stepped closer. The gas jet hissed between them. "You purchased the ticket recorded in Grimsby's ledger to establish an alibi that would not bear scrutiny. You sent Clara to the warehouse in your stead wearing your cloak, your scent. She met Sir Reginald, or someone posing as him, and took the ruby. But the real stone never left Curzon Street, did it?" Irene crushed the cigarette beneath her heel. "Prove it." Holmes smiled, thin and dangerous. "I intend to." He produced the kid glove from Limehouse, held it to her face. The attar of roses was unmistakable. "Your scent, your size, your ink, and this—" He turned the glove inside out. Stitched into the lining, a tiny pocket held a single crimson petal and a scrap of paper. In the same hand, Warehouse 12, midnight. R. "Reggie's handwriting," she whispered. "Forged," Holmes corrected. "The pressure is too even, the loop's too perfect. Grimsby's copperplate disguised. You were the lure, Miss Vale. But who held the rod?" A crash from the flies. A rope uncoiled, a sandbag thudded to the stage inches from Holmes's feet. We looked up, nothing but shadows and the creak of rigging. Irene Vale was already moving, cloak billowing as she darted for the stage door. Holmes lunged, caught her wrist. "The game is not yet played out." She twisted free, eyes blazing. "Then play it without me." She vanished into the wings. Her footsteps echoed like gunshots on the wooden stairs. Holmes stared after her, fingers drumming against his thigh. "Watson, the glove, note the tear at the thumb. Left-handed grip. Our murderer is ambidextrous. Or has an accomplice." Outside, the rain had returned, drumming on the theater's glass roof like impatient fingers. Somewhere in the dark, a woman laughed. The sound of a rose thorn dragged across silk. Chapter 6. Footprints in the fog. Midnight in Limehouse is a different country. The fog rolls in thick as wool soaked in tar, swallowing sound and sight until the world narrows to the circle of your lantern and the slap of your own boots. Holmes and I left the cab at West India Dock Road and walked the last quarter mile on foot, collars up, revolvers loose in our pockets. The Thames breathed beside us, slow and black, exhaling the stink of rope, rot, and opium. Warehouse 12 crouched at the end of a spur, its corrugated doors padlocked, its windows blind with boards. A single gas lamp flickered overhead, the glass cracked, the flame guttering like a dying soul. Holmes knelt at the threshold, bullseye lantern hooded to a slit. "Fresh prints," he murmured. 2 sets, one hobnail, size 8, left heel worn inward. Our sailor from the earlier traces. The second lighter, narrow French heel, lady's boot, size 5. He scraped the mud with a knife. It came away dark and grainy. Thames silt mixed with sawdust from the Lyceum workshops. Miss Vale's understudy was here after all. He produced his picklock, the padlock side open. Inside, the air was colder, thick with the smell of wet hemp and rat droppings. Our lanterns threw long shadows across overturned crates stamped Calcutta tea and Batavia sugar. In the center of the floor lay the crimson petal we had seen earlier, now joined by a second and a third, forming a deliberate trail toward the rear wall. Holmes followed silent as a cat. The petals ended at a stack of crates. Behind them, a makeshift table of packing cases, a guttering candle stub, and a derringer identical to the one in Curzon Street. Nickel plate, ivory grips, one chamber discharged. Beside it, a lady's kid glove, size 612, the palm stiff with dried blood. "Staged," Holmes said softly. "The murderer wished us to find this, but why?" A scrape overhead. We looked up, too late. A net of fishing rope dropped from the rafters, weighted with iron ballast. Holmes shoved me aside. The net crashed where we had stood, splintering crates. From the darkness above came a grunt and the flash of a blade. The sailor dropped like a stone, cutlass swinging. Holmes parried with his stick. Steel rang on ebony. I fired into the shadows, missed. The man was pockmarked, 2 fingers missing from his left hand, eyes wild with gin and fear. He lunged again. Holmes sidestepped, tripped him with a neat baritsu throw. The sailor sprawled, cutlass skittering across the boards. Holmes pinned him with a knee. "Name." "Silas Crowe, mate of the Black Swan," he spat. "Paid 5 sovereigns by a veiled lady to wait here. Said the baronet cheated her brother at cards in Rangoon. Told me to take the ruby and vanish. Describe her." Black veil, crimson cloak, voice like silk over broken glass. "Left this." He jerked his chin toward the derringer. "Said to fire it into the air when the gent arrived. Scare him into handing over the stone." Holmes lifted the pistol, sniffed the barrel. "Discharged within the hour. Yet Sir Reginald died 3 nights ago." He turned to me. "Watson, the glove. Note the blood is arterial, still tacky. Our sailor is no murderer, merely a pawn." Crowe struggled. "I never killed no one. She said it was a jest, a lesson." Holmes bound his wrists with his own belt. "A lesson that ends in the gallows unless you tell us where the lady went. Down the Rat Run to the river. There's a skiff tied under the pier." We left Crowe trussed amid the crates and followed the petal trail to a side door. It opened onto a narrow jetty where the Thames lapped at barnacled piles. Fog swallowed the opposite bank. Somewhere a buoy clanged mournfully. Footprints led to the edge, French heel deep in the mud, and stopped. A rope hung from a bollard, slick with use. Holmes knelt, lantern low. "The skiff was here. Departed within the last 20 minutes. Note the drip pattern, oars shipped hastily." He scraped the mud, beneath it a glint of metal, a button, mother of pearl, engraved with a tiny rose. From a gentleman's waistcoat. Sir Reginald's, perhaps, or his killer's. A sudden splash. We spun, revolvers raised, nothing but ripples spreading into the fog. Then faint and mocking, the scent of a tar of roses drifting on the tainted air. Holmes's eyes gleamed. "The crimson rose is still in bloom, Watson, and she has taken the real ruby with her." Chapter 7. The poisoner's garden dawn crept over Curzon Street like a guilty conscience, pale light filtering through the conservatory's grimy glass roof. The Ashcombe hothouse was a jungle of glass and iron, humid as Calcutta in monsoon season. Orchids drooped from hanging baskets. Night-blooming cereus exhaled a cloying sweetness that clung to the throat. Lady Beatrice knelt among the pots, mourning silk replaced by a gardener's apron. Her violet eyes red-rimmed but steady. She did not look up as we entered. "Mr. Holmes," she said, voice muffled by foliage, "you find me among the living. The dead keep their own company upstairs." Holmes moved between the aisles, fingers brushing leaves as though reading Braille. "Your conservatory is renowned, madam. The Horticultural Society speaks of your monkshood with particular awe." She rose, brushing soil from her hands. "Aconitum napellus, wolfsbane. My late husband suffered migraines. I distilled a tincture, 3 drops in brandy, no more. Fatal in larger measure." She indicated a row of blue-flowered spikes, their hooded petals sinister in the half-light. Reginald swore the scent reminded him of his mother's garden in Simla. I felt the hair rise on my neck. "You prepared his nightly dose?" "Every evening for a fortnight." She lifted a small violet glass vial from a shelf, the label in her elegant hand, Tinct Aconiti, 1/100. The cork was wax-sealed, but a faint ring of residue clung to the neck. Holmes took it, held it to the light. "Empty," he said. "Yet the seal is intact. Curious." He uncorked it. The scent of bitter almonds drifted out sharp beneath the floral haze. Not aconite alone. Prussic acid distilled from the leaves. Rapid, painless, paralyses the heart within minutes. Lady Beatrice's composure wavered. I measured carefully. "Yet the brandy glass in the study held an oily film," Holmes interrupted. "Enough to fell an elephant. Someone substituted your tincture with a lethal concentrate." He turned to a workbench where mortar and pestle stood beside a spirit lamp. Residue of crushed leaves clung to the stone. "Your handiwork, madam." She shook her head. "I was in my boudoir all night. The conservatory connects to the study by a service door, locked, but the key hangs here." She indicated a nail above the bench. The key was missing. Holmes's eyes narrowed. The bolt on the French window showed verdigris. Someone entered from the balcony, substituted the dose, and exited the same way. The derringer was fired post-mortem to mask the poison, a locked-room illusion. I examined the service door. Oak, Yale lock, no scratches. But the jamb bore a faint scuff at knee-height. A small person, or someone crawling. Or someone who knew the house intimately. Holmes knelt, lantern low. On the tile floor, a single, crimson petal, pressed flat by a boot heel. "Our rose again." Lady Beatrice sank onto a wicker stool, hands clasped. "Reginald discovered something. The night he died, he confronted Grimsby about discrepancies in the household accounts, thousands missing over years. He threatened exposure." Holmes's voice was soft. "And Grimsby has access to every key, every vial, every secret, including your monkshood." A crash from the house. We turned as one. Through the glass panels, we saw Grimsby in the morning room, silhouetted against the window, a valise at his feet. He looked up, saw us, and bolted. Holmes was already moving. "Watson, the revolver!" We burst into the corridor as Grimsby reached the front door. I fired into the ceiling. Plaster rained like snow. The butler froze, hands raised. "Going somewhere?" Holmes asked pleasantly. Grimsby's face was gray. "I've served this family 31 years. "And embezzled for 20, Holmes finished. "The crimson ink, the forged appointments, the substituted poison, all to silence Sir Reginald before he exposed you. Your niece, Clara Wren, the understudy, played the Crimson Rose. She lured him to the study with promises of the ruby, distracted him while you poured the doctored brandy. Grimsby sagged. He was going to ruin us. Clara's career will end in Newgate, Holmes said. Watson, the cuffs. As I bound the butler's wrists, Lady Beatrice appeared in the doorway, monk's hood vial clenched in her fist. Her eyes met Grimsby's, grief, betrayal, and something colder. The rose that bloomed in your garden, she whispered, has poisoned us all. Chapter 8. The Midnight Masquerade. The Langham Hotel's grand ballroom blazed like a chandeliered sun against the November dark. Crystal dripped from the ceiling in frozen waterfalls. The orchestra sawed through a Strauss waltz that set 100 silk skirts swirling. It was the annual Horticultural Society masquerade. Black tie, black masks, and every conservatory in London emptied of its rarest blooms. Holmes and I had slipped in on forged invitations, he in domino black, I in harlequin patches. The air was thick with hothouse perfume and the rustle of secrets. Holmes's eyes, sharp behind the slits of his mask, quartered the room. The Crimson Rose will be here. Poison and petals, her signature. I followed his gaze. Lady Beatrice glided past in a gown sewn with tiny silk roses, each petal tipped with a bead of ruby glass. Her mask was porcelain, painted with violet eyes. The jet brooch at her throat had been replaced by a fresh crimson bloom. She moved like a woman underwater, grief slowed to grace. Near the punch bowl, a figure in scarlet domino caught the light. Irene Vale, unmistakable despite the mask. She laughed at something her companion whispered, a low ripple that carried over the music. The companion was tall, stooped, masked as Pierrot in white satin. A gloved hand, left hand, rested on Irene's waist with familiar ease. Holmes's breath hissed. Grimsby, the height, the tremor in the shoulder. Parkinson's. He has not fled after all. We threaded through the crowd. The waltz ended, couples applauded. The orchestra struck up a gallop. Holmes timed it perfectly, cut in as Pierrot spun Irene toward the terrace doors. I took Irene's hand. Holmes seized Pierrot's wrist. "May I?" Holmes murmured. Pierrot's eyes widened behind the mask, slate gray, Butler's eyes. He tried to pull away. Holmes's grip was iron. Irene gasped, crimson mask slipping. Beneath it, not the actress, but a younger face, heart-shaped, violet-eyed. Clara Wren, the understudy. "You," I said. Clara's laugh was brittle. "Dr. Watson, always the gallant." She twisted free, melted into the crush. Grimsby, unmasked now, Pierrot's satin torn at the shoulder, stumbled back against a potted palm. "Mr. Holmes," he began. "Save it for the yard," Holmes signaled. 2 plainclothes constables materialized from the ferns. "Grimsby, you are under arrest for the murder of Sir Reginald Ashcombe, Clara Wren, accessory." The orchestra faltered. 100 masked faces turned. Lady Beatrice appeared at Holmes's elbow, gown shimmering like spilled blood. "Grimsby," her voice cracked, "after 31 years." The butler's head bowed. "He was going to ruin us, milady. The accounts, thousands. Clara's career was worth my husband's life." Beatrice's hand rose. The crimson rose at her throat trembled. Then she saw Clara being led away, violet eyes defiant behind the broken mask. Something shifted in Beatrice's face, grief hardening to judgment. Holmes steered us to a quiet alcove. The pieces fit. Grimsby embezzled for years to fund Clara's training. Sir Reginald discovered the discrepancies the night of the 3rd. Clara, veiled as the Crimson Rose, lured him to the study with the forged rendezvous note. Grimsby entered via the conservatory, substituted the monk's hood tincture in the brandy. 4 minutes. Heart paralysis. He fired the Derringer post-mortem, locked the door with his duplicate key, exited the same way. The warehouse, the sailor, the fake ruby, all blinds. I stared at the dancers, masks gleaming like skulls. And Irene Vale? A dupe. Clara used her cloak, her scent, her reputation, the playbill, the glove, planted to implicate the actress. A sudden commotion at the terrace doors. Clara had slipped her escort, darted into the fog. Holmes cursed and gave chase. I followed, harlequin diamonds flashing. The terrace overlooked Portland Place. Below, a hansom waited, door open. Clara reached it, then stopped. Lady Beatrice stood in the doorway, monk's hood vial raised like a pistol. "Stop," Beatrice said quietly. Clara laughed, wild. "You'll ruin everything." "No," Beatrice replied, "you already have." She hurled the vial. It shattered at Clara's feet. The scent of bitter almonds rose sharp and final. Clara screamed, slipped on the wet marble, and fell hard. The constables swarmed. Holmes caught Beatrice as she swayed. "The rose that blooms in poison," he murmured, "withers all it touches." Chapter 9. The Rose That Never Bloomed. The fog had returned to Baker Street like a penitent, thinner now, revealing the gas lamps in bruised halos. Our sitting room fire crackled low. The clock ticked past 2. Holmes stood at the mantel, pipe unlit, the pieces of the puzzle laid before him like a dissected flower. The crimson note, the fake ruby, the monk's hood vial, the kid glove, the mother-of-pearl button, the forged playbill. Lestrade lounged in the basket chair, hat on knee, eyes narrowed in reluctant admiration. Lady Beatrice sat opposite, veil discarded, violet eyes fixed on the flames. Grimsby and Clara Wren had been taken to the yard an hour earlier. The house felt hollow without their shadows. Holmes spoke without turning. "The rose that never bloomed is the key, Watson. A metaphor, but also a literal truth." I poured coffee, hands still trembling from the chase. "The ruby?" "No." "The niece?" He pivoted, eyes alight. "Clara Wren, Grimsby's sister's child, raised in the Ashcombe kitchen, trained in secret for the stage. Sir Reginald promised her the Lyceum, funded by the embezzled thousands. When he discovered the theft, he threatened exposure. Clara became the Crimson Rose to save her future." Lestrade snorted. "A pretty story, but the locked room was never locked from within." Holmes lifted the verdigris-flecked bolt. Grimsby entered via the conservatory service door, key on his ring. He poured the substituted monk's hood into the brandy while Clara distracted Sir Reginald with the forged rendezvous note. 4 minutes. Heart paralysis. Grimsby fired the Derringer post-mortem, wiped the barrel, placed it in the right hand, knowing the left-handed detail would be overlooked. He locked the study door with his duplicate, exited through the conservatory, and scratched the French window bolt to suggest an outside intruder. He picked up the playbill. Clara, wearing Irene Vale's cloak, purchased the ticket to establish a false alibi. The warehouse meeting with Silas Crowe was a blind. Crowe paid to fire a shot and plant the fake ruby. The real stone was never moved. Grimsby substituted paste weeks earlier, selling the original through Limehouse fences to cover the embezzlement. Lady Beatrice's voice was a whisper. The threatening note? Grimsby's copperplate disguised, the Playfair cipher beneath, Clara's flourish learned from a stage magician, the petals, the attar, her signature. Holmes lifted the kid glove. Size 612, left thumb torn. Clara's grip when she held the Derringer steady for her uncle. I remembered the masquerade. The button? From Grimsby's waistcoat, lost in the struggle when Clara slipped the net at the warehouse. The sailor was to take the blame. Lestrade rose, hat in hand. Enough for the yard. Embezzlement, murder, conspiracy, they'll hang. Holmes's smile was wintry. Justice, Inspector, not vengeance. The door closed behind Lestrade. Silence settled, broken only by the fire's soft collapse. Lady Beatrice stood, the crimson rose at her throat now wilted. "I trusted him," she said. 31 years. He served my wedding breakfast, held my hand when my son died in infancy. And for a girl's ambition, Holmes's voice softened. Ambition is a rose that blooms in any soil, madam, even blood. She left without another word. The fog swallowed her silhouette at the stair. I poured whiskey. The moral, Holmes? He stared into the flames. That loyalty, like monkshood, can be distilled into poison. The faithful dog bites deepest when the bone is withheld. Outside, a church bell tolled 3. Somewhere in the city, a rose withered unseen. Chapter 10. The Final Deduction. Dawn over Baker Street is rarely gentle, but on this November morning it arrived like a hesitant witness, pale light sliding between the curtains to find Holmes and me still at the breakfast table. The coffee had gone cold. Toast lay untouched. Between us on the cloth lay the last petals of the case, the wilted crimson rose, the fake ruby, the monk's hood vial, the mother-of-pearl button, the forged playbill, the kid glove with its torn thumb. Lestrade had taken Grimsby and Clara Wren at first light. The yard's Black Maria had rumbled away through the fog like a funeral cortege. Yet the room felt unfinished, as though the air itself waited for the final chord. Holmes stood at the window, pipe unlit, watching the street awaken. "Watson," he said without turning, "the moral lesson. You asked for it last night. It is this: every garden contains its own poison, and the most dangerous bloom is the one we cultivate in secret." I pushed aside my cup. Grimsby's loyalty to Clara. Precisely. 31 years of service distilled into a single act of betrayal. He saw in the girl the child Lady Beatrice lost, the ambition Sir Reginald denied his own lineage. The embezzlement began as charity, £5 here, 10 there, until the sum became a noose. When Sir Reginald discovered the discrepancies, Grimsby chose murder over disgrace. He turned eyes grey as winter steel. The mechanics were simple once the human element was understood. Clara forged the rendezvous note in crimson ink, her uncle's copperplate disguised by theatrical flourish. She lured Sir Reginald to the study with promises of the ruby, distracting him while Grimsby entered via the conservatory. The monk's hood tincture, substituted days earlier, was poured into the brandy. 4 minutes, heart paralysis. Grimsby fired the Derringer post-mortem, wiped the barrel, placed it in the right hand. He locked the door with his duplicate key, scratched the French window bolt to suggest an outside intruder, and exited the same way. I remembered the warehouse. The sailor? Silas Crowe? A blind. Paid 5 sovereigns to fire a shot and plant the fake ruby. The real stone had been sold weeks earlier through Limehouse fences. Grimsby needed cash to silence the brokers. The threatening note, the Playfair cipher, the petals, the attar, all Clara's stagecraft, designed to implicate Irene Vale. Holmes lifted the kid glove. Size 612, left thumb torn, Clara's grip when she held the Derringer steady for her uncle. The mother-of-pearl button from his waistcoat lost in the warehouse struggle. The playbill printed after the Lyceum closed to establish a false alibi. The net in the rafters, Clara's final flourish, meant to trap us as we closed in. I poured fresh coffee, the scent cutting through the lingering bitterness of monkshood. And Lady Beatrice? Holmes's smile was thin. Innocent, yet complicit in her grief. She cultivated the monkshood, provided the tincture, trusted the butler who poisoned her husband. Her confrontation at the masquerade, shattering the vial, was catharsis, not confession. The door opened. Mrs. Hudson entered with a telegram on a salver. Holmes tore it open. Grimsby confessed. Stop Clara Wren claims insanity. Stop Ruby recovered Limehouse. Stop Lestrade. Holmes tossed it to the fire. The yard will hang the uncle, commit the niece to bedlam, justice of a sort. I watched the paper curl and blacken. The rose that never bloomed, Clara's career, withered before it opened. Like the Ashcombe marriage, the embezzled fortune, the trust of 31 years. He filled his pipe at last, the match flaring like a small defiant sun. We are all gardeners, Watson. Some plant roses, some monkshood. The difference lies in what we choose to water. Outside, a coster's barrow rattled past. A church bell tolled 7. The fog had lifted entirely, revealing a city washed clean. Holmes drew the curtains wide. "Come," he said. "The game is played out. Let us walk to the yard and sign the papers, then breakfast. Eggs, bacon, and the morning's post. Life, unlike roses, continues to bloom." I rose, the old thrill stirring despite the weariness. As we descended the 17 steps, the scent of attar of roses lingered one last time, then was gone, carried away on the crisp November wind.